So in this webcast I'm going to be demonstrating how you can do unit testing in SharePoint 2010 with Visual Studio 2010. So basically what I've started off here is I've got a simple class that I've built, and I'm now going to try and unit test this. So again, it's just a very basic thing using Microsoft.SharePoint, and I've got a method called return site name where I pass in a site URL, go into the SP web object, and then I just simply return the web.title. So typically what you would do as a normal developer if you used MS Test was you go in here and create unit tests. Now this will come up with a wizard straight away and review your classes and suggest some things. And what I'm going to do is just take the defaults, and I'm just going to give it a project name. And you'll see that once that's created, what will actually happen is that it'll create me a unit test class with an already stubbed out one for me. Now, when I do a build on this, that's going to work fine. But unfortunately, what you usually do is just come up to your tests and go run tests in context, or Control RT. And what you find is that it will build the project and then it'll actually start running a test for you. So you see there it's running my tests, and you're going to get an exception. If you right click on that and go view test details, you'll actually see that it's give me a bad image format exception. Now that's because I need to run this in with a few settings to get that to work. The first being, if I look at the project details of that project by just going Alt Enter, is I need to be targeting the .NET 3.5 framework. The second thing I need to be doing is I need to be targeting the 64-bit platform. The problem with MS Test is, if I do an Alt Enter on that, is that if I try and change the target framework back to 3.5, I get a nice warning. I click yes, but then it actually tells me that it's going to cancel it. And this is actually by design. Microsoft have decided that they're not going to allow you to change the MS Test back to framework 3.5. Now, it's not just the SharePoint community that's going to be affected by that, so I expect that in the final release, hopefully that will change, but for now this is an issue. So in the meantime, if you do want to do any unit testing, there are a few other options. The first being NUnit. Now I've done a webcast before on SharePoint 2007 with unit testing, where effectively all you do is you add your NUnit.core and NUnit framework to your project, and you reference the project you want to test, and then we just create a test method with a method attribute like that, and we're going to call the method return site name test. And this is very similar code to the MS Test. And what we can do now is we can actually execute this. Now there's a few ways we can run this. Traditionally you would use a command line and you would call the NUnit console or the NUnit GUI. Now I can do that very easily by adding add-ons to the tools menu. So you'll see here I have NUnit and I have NUnit console. Now just to quick you get a bit of an idea, the way that works is I've just added one here, given it a name, pointed to the NUnit.exe. Now one thing to bear in mind, this is very important, is you need to use the correct runner. So when you install or download NUnit, you get the NUnit.exe, and you'll also get NUnit-x86.exe, and likewise for the console too. Please ensure that you don't use the x86 and you do use the one without the x86, because this is the 64-bit runner. Then you simply come in here and you add your path directory to your DLL you want to run with the extra attribute of /run, or argument, sorry, should I say, and the initial directory is project directory. And very similar with the console, it's just NUnit.console in the exe, and same deal then, but without the /run on it, and the bin directory. Now you actually see that I can probably change that to that anyway, and that's going to do the same thing. So to demonstrate that, if I just go Tools, click on NUnit, what this is actually going to do is going to run the NUnit GUI for me. It's going to automatically load that class library in, and now it's actually going to run the test for me because I added the /run argument on there. So that's now spinning up SharePoint and calling the object model for me, and you'll see that it's one has passed in a time of 12.2 seconds. If I now go in and run the NUnit console approach, again, it's going to be running NUnit. And what you'll find here is, I know you'd kind of expect it to be at the same kind of 12 seconds on here as well, is it's just rendering this to the output window. And you'll see here that one was run and there was no errors, no failures, no inclusives, and 12.4 seconds. Another approach to running these is to install what's called ReSharper. Now ReSharper gives you these in-context things on the sides of the test that you've got. And what I can actually do is click and select run there. And what you'll see now is that that's actually running that test very much like the NUnit GUI was, but in context within Visual Studio. And the beauty here is that I can do things like I can run individual tests once this has been loaded. So if I wanted to run that again, I can just go run selected tests. So if there was multiple tests here, you can just pick and choose which ones, or you can do it obviously from here. Now another thing with ReSharper which is commonly used is the run with debug. Now if we run that up, this is actually going to fire this application into debug mode. And what you'll find here is that hopefully we should hit that breakpoint. And now when we come in and do an F11 on here, and we F10 into here, and if I wanted to F10 into that, what you'll find is that we'll actually get, once it does its homework, we'll actually be able to get in and have a look at that site object and pick things through. So it's very handy for debugging when you're writing your code in SharePoint. And I'm just going to F5 that through and clear that. And you'll see that that's actually come back with a success too there. Now, with ReSharper, obviously that's a paid for product, so not everyone's going to have that, and you may not think that the tools options are enough. So there is another approach, which is testdriven.net. Now testdriven.net, if I right click on here and go run tests, you'll actually see that it's saying that its test is started, and if I go to my output window, you'll see that the output window is here and it's starting that test for me. And what you'll see here is that testdriven.net's actually given us a runtime error, and this is partly to do with a similar thing to what happens with MS Test as well. Now, there is some work being done here to try and get that so that we can target the 3.5 rather than 4.0 within this class library project, but unfortunately it's not available at the moment. So realistically, the approaches are at the minute is the ReSharper approach, is the tools menu approach for NUnit. One thing to bear in mind is there is another framework called XUnit which is available on Coplex, and a very similar thing, you add the XUnit library to your reference once you've downloaded the XUnit library, and you'll find it's a very similar thing in terms of you just adding a different using statement, and rather than test here you're having fact instead, and the equal rather than r equal. The only thing you'll notice is the ReSharper context is gone. So ReSharper doesn't actually support XUnit currently out of the box for Visual Studio 2010. So the only approach here is something very similar to the NUnit, which is to use the XUnit console and run it through this way. And what you will notice here, once this runs, is that that's actually running very, very slightly quicker than the NUnit version. Now, bear in mind here that the real benefits for me, I think, is with ReSharper is the fact that you have this debug mode here, which is going to become very, very handy for you when you're running your unit tests and you want to just go in and spike things to see what objects are what inside the site thing. So I would highly recommend looking at this ReSharper approach. Let's wait and see what happens with MS Test with the next public release of Visual Studio to see whether they fix that, and obviously in kind that will fix the testdriven.net approach as well. So I'll keep you up to date with any changes in that. I'd just like to say a big thanks to Andrew Woody and his colleagues at 21 Apps for kind of pushing this through as well. He's got some great content on there, and also Kirk Evans and Chris Beasley as well, who presented at SPC09 and have done some great work with unit testing there at SBC and also in the product team at the moment with the documentation. So as I say, keep all those guys in mind. Okay, thanks very much.